Okay, here I am with the GSXR and these guys, because they like to come and, what do you guys do again? Watch and help or something like that? Yeah, make sure I'm doing things right, something like that. Yeah, that's what they do. And the reason we're here is because we have a couple of problems, which I'll show you. So the first one is that this bike, I high-sided it at Mansfield, and it had some case covers on it, and what they did is they damaged, well, they were kind of sliders really actually, and they damaged the case basically and fell over. It sort of protected this from getting a hole in it, but it damaged it anyway, so they didn't really work very well. I think actually from doing this that if you want to protect your engine cases, just get like R&G case covers or something like that, or Kevlar carbon case covers would do the job. And they just, you put them over the top, usually use some RTV silicone, some of them bolt on, and they protect the cases just as good, and they don't damage the case in this sort of situation. If you have a really good fast slide, they're gonna grind through it, and you're gonna damage your case anyway, in which case you have to replace it like I am. And I'll show you also I'll show you the slider and what happens to that. Do you want to hold this? And I'll just show you this. So basically what happens is that when you crash, like, that's obviously slid down the track, and what happens is all the bolts get all bent. Force on this is just way too much. It's a pretty heavy bike when it's sliding. Everything gets bent. So these are a bad idea. They just don't work. You can even see on the end of here where it's actually, the aluminium's actually been hit so hard it's actually bent the end of it right over. It's yeah, even there you can see it's slightly bent, like a bit of a banana on the end. So yeah, these are not very good. These don't really work. This was all experimental when I put these on. They seem like a good idea. They don't really work. They don't really protect the case properly. But luckily you can get cases, and I'll show you the case. So the case is over here. And so it is an aftermarket case. These are pretty cheap. They're not overly expensive. They're pretty much the same, you know. There's no use buying a Suzuki one, but you can buy one of these which will do the job just as well. You can get ones that don't have the logos on it. I think it was like $2 extra or something to have the logo. It wasn't a whole lot more. And you just put, the Stator will be housed in here. The starter motor drive is housed in here. And you just swap this over. It comes with that piece. It comes with a gasket for the starter, and the starter cover, so it's all brand new. And it also comes with a rubbishy gasket, which would probably do the job anyway. That's what I'm going to use. So just a matter of talking it down properly. So that's what this comes with. And then the second problem I have with this bike is that it's the dreaded GSXR I won't start problem. So what I should have done actually right from the start is I should have got my multimeter and checked when my bike was running the voltage to the battery. I didn't do that. I assumed because my battery was old that probably it was my battery. Bought another battery. Bought a much better battery. Actually bought a lithium-ion battery, which is like way lighter, and it's supposed to have a better start side. It can start the bike a lot more times and a lot better, but expensive. What I should have done probably is keep the old battery, and I should have checked it. When I did check, this problem's been ongoing for a little while. I noticed that the bike sometimes wasn't running real good. And if I started and stopped the bike, a lot of times, like when I was doing Gymkhana, what would happen is you couldn't start the bike. You have to push start it, bump start it, which was, and then last night eventually it got to the point where you couldn't even really bump start it anymore. It became quite bad. So I checked. So I did check the voltage this time, and this Stator, the regulator was only putting out 7.5 volts to the battery, which is not enough. Should be around 13.5 volts, something like that. I was lucky actually, because what can happen with these, and what does happen a lot of the time, is when the regulator dies, it puts out too much voltage in it, and it fries the stator, and it fries, like there's a connector in here, this connector here. This connector's in pretty good nick, but and this is the connector that comes from the stator, but normally these are all fried as well, so just about every case when you look at a Gixxer when this happens, this is normally fried. On this bike, I was lucky that didn't happen. And then what I've bought is I bought a new packet. So I'll show you stator first actually. So sorry, the regulator. So this is the old regulator, and the old regulator, what happens is they get fried. This sits actually, the radiator's sitting here. The radiator heat comes straight through, goes straight onto the regulator. It eventually over time fries the regulator, and every few years you end up having to replace the regulator. And this is how they look when they're wrecked. So you can sort of see it's kind of got some lines. Kind of looks like it's kind of melted almost on the back. And this is just fried basically. It's fried from all the heat and from the heat cycles going through it day after day after day. And usually that will fry this plug and the plug on the other side as well. As I say, on this one it hasn't done that, but on a lot of cases that does happen. These regulators are a bit of a problem because they run very, very hot anyway. So normally when the bike's manufactured properly and the manufacturer puts this in the right place, this should be in a good airflow position, and on the Gixxers it's not. It's as I say, it's right behind the radiator, which is not a good spot. But luckily you can buy aftermarket ones. So I've bought one here. This is a brand new one, and this is a MOSFET regulator. I'll try and compare them side by side. So it's much bigger to begin with, more cooling area. It's got much thicker wires on it. It's just a much better unit, and not only is it a better unit, but because it's a MOSFET unit rather than a standard transistor style unit, it can turn itself on and off. So if this gets too hot, rather than cooking itself like the old one does, this will actually switch itself off, and it'll just stop pumping power to the battery. It'll wait until it's cooled down. When it's cooled down enough, it'll switch itself back on and start working again. So this is a way better way to go. If you're gonna take the time to replace the regulator, don't muck around with a crappy regulator. Just get a MOSFET regulator. It costs a little bit more, but the benefits outweigh the cost. And the other thing that you should do probably while you're at it is replace the stator, because usually the stator, when the regulator goes, usually gets a little bit fried as well. Mine and my bike might be okay. I'm going to take it out anyway because I've got to take the case off. But this is an aftermarket stator, and this is again, these stators are much more heavy duty than the standard ones that come in the bike. So the leads are heavier, the coils are heavier. It's just a better stator. Don't replace it with an OEM one. This is far cheaper than an OEM one, and it's far better than an OEM one. So I wouldn't recommend going down the OEM route with these, because these are just better. So the best thing to do if you've got a fried one and you're going to do it yourself is buy the stator, buy the regulator, the MOSFET regulator, and just do the whole job all at once, so that you do it once and you do it properly. It's not too hard a job, this. I guess it comes down to sort of how competent you are sort of working on your bike. I'm not a mechanic, but I can do this kind of stuff okay. And the other thing that this comes with actually is connectors. So as I said, like a lot of times the connector on the bike side gets fried, and this setup comes with new connectors, so that if they are fried on your bike, you can cut the plug off and you can put new plugs on, and away you go again. So that's the other good thing about this kit. What was the other thing I was going the other thing that you need actually for this job as well, and this is a good thing to have as well, is what they call like dielectric grease, or well, they call this carbon grease, but it's all the same thing. So this grease, what you do is you pack this into the connectors when you put it together, and this will keep the connectors from corroding and going bad, and it can stop that melting kind of issue that goes on. So this is good stuff. If you're going to do the job, do it right. Doesn't cost a lot of money. I think this stuff was about 12 bucks for a big tube. You can do a lot of electrical connectors with this. And this is real handy to have in your tool case. So what I'm going to do now anyway is I'm going to take the stator out, take the cover off. We'll do that shortly, and then we'll see. We'll come back on and I'll show you what that's all looking like, whether it's melted or whatever. And we'll take it from there, and I'll tell you how hard the job is once I've actually done it as well. So far it's been pretty easy. Okay, so we've taken the stator cover off with the stator. Now getting this off is a little bit of a pain in the ass because it is magnetic, and so there's a little bit of force. So once you actually start breaking seal around here, it's also got this locator pin in it as well, which doesn't help the case. A couple of locator pins. So you've got to kind of gently pry this a little bit, but you've got to be really careful prying because you don't want to damage just the facing, otherwise you won't be able to seal this again. So you pry it off, and yeah, sure enough, the stator inside this is fried. So you can see here where the stator's burnt, and this is a really typical situation with Gixxers, is that regulator fails, and when the regulator fails, the stator's still trying to generate a lot of current, and what it does is the stator can't dump that current to the regulator properly, and so it fries itself. This is the first stages of a kind of burnout of the stator, and actually what happens over time is that this stator would all, like if we kept running this, it would eventually just burn all of the stator out. And that's typically what happens, because people do, they run them, and then until they just don't run anymore. Now the other thing that happens is, because this wire goes up alongside the side of the engine, this wire gets baked, and this is like, seriously, it's like a piece of concrete. It is like, this is no longer rubber. So all the outer insulation on this wire has gone hard, so that's also another bad thing as well, because what could happen actually if this is moved, it could actually break inside there, and the wires could short out, and all kinds of things could happen. So it's a good thing to replace all of this, and that's why I was saying before, replace this stuff. Don't assume the old one's okay, because probably it isn't. Always take it out, always have a look. There are some checks you can do actually with a multimeter if you know how to operate a multimeter. You can get those tricks out of the manual, and it'll tell you what readings these should have on them. And if the readings are wrong, well, then it means your stator's had it. So we're going to replace this now. We're going to unbolt this one. We're going to bolt the new one in into the new cover, and then we'll go from there.
So while I was working on this, I had this idea of moving the regulator to get it out of the hot airflow.
Carbon build up and stuff. You see, I reckon I've got enough plugs here now. I reckon I've got enough plugs here that what I could do, if I wanted to, is I could extend this, you know, and I could move this. I could actually move my regulator, and I could move it away from where it is and move it further down the bike or under the nose or something like that. And I might look at doing that, eh?
Yeah, just keep in mind, the more plugs and the more connections you have, the higher resistance you have across the wire.
Yeah, but these are pretty thick wires compared to the old one, eh?
Oh yeah, but you're putting a lot of current through them. Putting a lot of current.
That's true. I mean, some people have located it into the airbox, but I was thinking like to do something like mount it under here, where it's like in a real cool airflow all the time. You wouldn't really notice it. Could easily be mounted under there. The wires might even be long enough to not even have to do anything, because it's only got to go to there. Normally it's on the side there. Instead of being on the side, I put it on the nose. I wonder how long the old wires are compared to. See, the old wire's quite short. Look, it's shorter, right? So I could easily relocate this. So that's another advantage with this, is that it's got longer wires on it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get this on and then figure out.
Yeah, you just have to fashion a mounting point though.
Yeah, but I could do that easily. I could just do that with some aluminium or something, you know. I've got aluminium strap here.
Now the final thing that was done on this bike was relocation of the regulator, as I sort of spoke about a little bit in the video. With this particular year of Gixxer in 06, they placed the regulator right behind the radiator, and it's a really terrible spot. It just basically bakes the radiator over the years, and they always fail. It's a well-known thing that this particular model has this failure, so it's good to relocate it. And they used to have it on the side of the bike, and then on this year, of course, they moved it to behind the radiator, which was a really stupid decision. So I decided to relocate mine. With the new regulator and everything, you've got enough wiring to be able to do that, so I actually managed to move it back up on the side. I managed to use the existing mount, one of the screw holes on the existing mount, and there's also a slight hole in the frame, so I made a bit of aluminium bar that managed to kind of poke up through that hole, and it was kind of wedged in there and then screwed on the other end, and that gets the stator out of the flow of the hot air from the radiator and into the airstream down the side of the bike so that it can stay cooler. So I think that's probably a good thing to do. So after setting the stator in place, we found that we had a little bit of a leak from the stator cover. It turned out that it had a little bit of like a pitting around where the starter motor cover fits, so we ended up having to use a little bit of RTV silicone or gasket cement just to fix that problem. The other trap that you need to watch for with these is that where the stator cover wires come through, there's like a rubber grommet. That rubber grommet also sometimes needs to be sealed, and in the case of this bike, that rubber grommet definitely needed sealing because it also had a little bit of a leak. The only other trap on this was that they're holding the gasket in place while you place the actual cover on is quite difficult. For one thing, everything's magnetic and it's being pulled on. So typically what you need to do is use a bit of gasket cement around one side of the gasket so that you can put the gasket on and it holds it in place while you actually do everything up and tighten everything down. So I'm going to be on to the third time taking this cover on and off, unfortunately, to try and get this oil leak problem sorted, but I think this third time will definitely get it sorted. The other thing that I did with the bike while we had it all in bits was replace the oil filter window, or the oil view window, because that on my bike, after 10 plus years, it had been got quite oil stained and it was getting quite hard to check the level of the oil. Turns out that you have to buy that whole the whole oil fill, the window and the gasket on it. You have to buy the whole thing as one unit. You could try and take the old one off and clean it, but I think the success and the chances of sealing it again once you do that are pretty low. That part, I think it cost me about $23 or something like that all up. It wasn't a lot of money, so it was better to just replace the whole thing, and then you know that it's all good once it's done. Aside from that, the whole job went pretty well. No more problems with the battery holding a charge or being charged properly. It's all been running pretty good since then, aside from the leak. So that's the job overall. If you guys have any questions or anything around it, if you're doing this job, you can always hit me up via Facebook, or you can send me a message straight from YouTube, and I'll answer pretty quickly.